Hi there. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm Darren, and I'm a solutions architect at AWS, and I'm your co-host for today's episode of AWS GameTime. We're joined today with Darshi. So introduce yourself. Go ahead.
Hello, Darshi McKenzie here, working as an account executive with AWS for games and towards the Nordic markets. And together we have Alexander, who I'm working with at Lootlocker, who's being our prominent guest.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you. And just for our viewers today, just to let you know again, if you don't know already, AWS GameTime is where we get to speak with the creators and game developers of your favorite games. And we get to understand the behind the scenes of how they make these games work and how AWS tools and services are used to make it happen. So thank you so much, Alexander, for joining us today. Perhaps, you can give us a bit of a brief background as to what Lootlocker does, just that quick elevator pitch before we dive into
So Lootlocker is the all-in-one game backend as a service built specifically for teams of all sizes and powering about 1,300 games to date and growing rapidly.
Yeah, that's super cool. And let's just kind of have a look at the trailer. I think we have a bit of promotional content that we have, and we can just let our audience better understand what Lootlocker does. Yep.
Building your dream game? I use Lootlocker's plug-and-play leaderboards, cloud saves and UGC to level up my game. Lootlocker is literally game-changing. It's this easy. Just create a free account, download the SDK, enable and configure the features that you want through Lootlocker's simple interface, call the function, release your game cross-platform on all devices. Lootlocker helps me manage my game, content and players all in one place. So what are you waiting for? Level up your game with Lootlocker today.
Yeah, very cool. I love the logo.
Thank you.
Very cute.
And I love him as well. Like the best energy in there. And I know that one was pretty high hit count on YouTube as well. You can
tell. Johannes did a great job making that. He did that entirely himself. Edited, filmed all the graphics and everything. And then the logo is a fan favorite for sure. The bird's name is Hector. In case it makes it.
Oh, right. Cool. Maybe it could be an NFT in the future. Who knows? Like everybody can adopt their own Hector, right?
We do have variations of it. This is one variation of the logo, and we have the Tim Burton style one. So
yeah, that's awesome.
We're creating our own Bored Ape Yacht Club NFT.
Yeah. No, I like it a lot. But that's really cool, right? Like it seems like Lootlocker does a lot for game developers. There's a lot of quality of life tooling and solutions that's actually available to them. So maybe you could just run us through what kinds of things developers can take advantage of from Lootlocker.
Yeah, Lootlocker is really designed for all types of games, and it really depends on what type of game you're building, what platform you're targeting, and then sort of it in many ways is a toolbox of features to support that. Primarily, it's three categories. It's the game systems. It's the player management and it's the content management. And depending on your game, you'll want to sort of dive into those different groups and use things like leaderboards or progression systems, and different types of content like loot boxes or currencies. And then obviously everything is connected to a player profile to store that information.
Yeah, and that's so powerful, right? Because these are features of games which are becoming more and more ubiquitous. Like they're just expected by the gamers themselves, right? In order to have a fully functioning game, and being able to have access to this so quickly as well, and not having to develop or dedicate too much development time into these kinds of features, it makes such a difference. So that's really cool.
Consumers are expecting the games to match whatever AAA game they've just played, and that requires a backend, pretty much a requirement these days. And they want to play cross-platform. They want to have be able to buy things in game, and all that stuff needs a backend. And it's useless for the developer to try to build it themselves because there are many tools out there. We're not the only one. There are many tools out there that have provided these services out of the box. Some better than others.
Super interesting. And later in today's episode, as we always do with AWS GameTime, we have some gameplay segments, and there's a game called Snow that I know that you developed, and actually you used some of these tools within Lootlocker to make it happen, right? So excited to see that happen later in today's episode. But perhaps before we dive into that, perhaps we can just kind of go through some of this presentation that you've prepared for us beforehand, and just learn a bit more about you, right? Your journey through the games industry and how you got to where you are today.
Yep, sounds good. Let me pull that up. Or there we go. Great. So yeah, I thought I'd just give you a little background about myself, so that you know that I'm not talking complete crap. But basically,
I was going to ask quickly before if one of maybe your granddad's granddad was a pirate. You got like some personal inspiration from there, like get the loot. So that's
yeah,
interesting.
no, the name and the characters actually were imagined completely separately. The name came first when we were trying to come up with something that described in its name what Lootlocker does. And loot is such a important part of games. You're on a quest for loot, but also a game developer, loot is the stuff that's important to you as a game developer, and ultimately that's the content of your game, because that's what makes your game, and it's the players, and the way that those are linked together. So it felt like when we came up on the name, we all kind of agreed. We had multiple other names that we'd been trying out, and then it was very clear to us. And so then when our friend Stellan, we asked him to do some design for us, he came up with Hector, the bird, and sort of the pirate theme. And then when we redid our website, we really leaned into it further, and the artist came up with this pirate. And we also wanted to show that Lootlocker is about and backends are not just for one type of game. Sure, if you're building a FPS multiplayer game or an MMO, you want to use a backend, but we really want to encourage developers of all types and making games of all types to use Lootlocker. And so with these characters, we've really tried to highlight that different types of games can use a backend.
Yeah, it's really cool. And the brand's just so approachable, right? Like it's not super edgy, it's not super exclusive. Like it seems there's something for everyone here, and I like that.
Yeah, I'm a big branding person, and I really am not a fan of the sort of traditional backend illustrations where you try to show some complex system in an illustration, because it's not really what it's like either. And I think it's just excluding other people that don't feel like it's for them. So we really tried to make something that is approachable. So I'm glad that you appreciate that as well.
Yeah.
Super catchy. It's perfect.
Thank you. So a little bit about me. I've been in the games industry nearly 18 years now. I started out at Avalanche, where I joined the games industry right out of high school. Really wanted to be in the games industry. Wasn't a programmer or an artist, but a friend of mine who I played World of Warcraft with, who was in the games industry, said, get a job testing games. And so that's what I did. I was a QA at Avalanche Studios, and then at Grin, and then at Chaos Studios in New York. Eventually left that and joined Autumn Games, which was a sort of an indie publisher based in New York. A little ahead of its time. Now we have, Devolver and Raw Fury and Team 17. And back then it was a little harder to be a publisher, especially when you were trying to publish digital games, because you were required by the first parties to launch a disc-based game as well. For every disc-based game, you got 3 digital game slots. And disc-based games are really hard to launch because you need to price them high enough. You need to sell through enough to the retailers, and it's just a much more complex way of publishing. So while that company didn't succeed, I learned a lot, and then eventually decided to start my own studio, Poppermost, which is that logo in the middle with the man with the top hat. And that's where we ended up developing Snow, which was a free-to-play open world skiing and snowboarding game, which we'll see a little bit more of later. And then, not to spoil the surprise, but that company didn't eventually work out. And after about 8 years of leading it, I had to shut it down and joined a company called Hat Rabbit, where we made mobile games. And that company we eventually sold to King. Cool. And then from there, while this shows him sequentially, it was actually sort of at the same time of founding Lootlocker. I also co-founded Aurora Punks, which is a indie game collective of a bunch of indie game studios where we provide sort of publishing and other services for indie. They're sort of part of the teams that are within the collective. So it gives me sort of a chance to stay connected to the development side of the games industry while I pursue my main focus now, which is Lootlocker, the backend as a service.
Yeah, and actually we got a message from our audience. So Hartstead, thank you so much. Love Call of the Wild by Avalanche. So I'm wondering if you had a chance to be part of the QA team for that.
No, that came quite a bit after, but we did have we're very close to Avalanche, and I did get a chance to check it out internally a little bit while we were building Snow. And Avalanche has made a very successful business around their open world hunting games. Now they've even added fishing to that, and they've done a really good job. So there's a lot of overlap with what we're trying to do with Snow, and what they have been able to achieve with Hunt to Call of the Wild.
Yeah, and that's amazing. And I think it's so cool, right, to see you've played lots of different roles throughout the industry, both in large studios, but also in the more indie side of development. And I think we're going to really touch upon some of that knowledge that you have, and really keen to hear your insights as well of where you see the games industry going. But we can touch upon that a little bit later. So sure. I'll let you continue.
Yeah. Here, just as a follow on from the previous slide, just some of the games that I worked on. I was very lucky to start my career testing Just Cause 2, which is, back then when we played it, it was the follow-up to a somewhat successful game. And then Just Cause 2 has become a hugely successful game for Avalanche. But also being able to, start my QA journey testing an open world game, I think probably planted the seed for me to eventually found my own open world game studio. But it's a great type of game to test because there's endless things you can do compared to some of the single player games where testing those games is basically just like.
We have a question here for you. My internet is like, whoa, in and out. Sorry guys, I don't know what's going on. Maybe they're doing some renovations nearby and the vibrations are disturbing my fiber. I'm coming back and in and out, just letting everyone know. So I'm doing my best here, keeping calm. But we had a question for you, Alex. Sorry.
Yeah. So Surge players. So basically, most backend services price their or have a usage-based pricing model around API calls. And what we've found, what we knew as game developers and what we found speaking to all the game developers we're working with is that API calls is really hard for game developers to understand, especially early on in development when they're trying to pick a service and try to figure out what the price is. So we've gone for a monthly active user based pricing model, which is easier to understand, but at the same time, the difference between API based and monthly active user based means that with API based, you're really only paying for the API calls that are being consumed by the players. Whereas with monthly active users, they might only play for a minute, their session might have only made a couple API calls versus playing for 10 hours and they made a couple hundred API calls. So a way to balance that out is basically we track the players and the API calls are making. And if we see that there's a large part of your user base that are only making a few API calls or significantly below the average amount per session, then we will intentionally exclude them from the monthly active user count when billing you. Sort of just a way just to make it fair for the developer as well. You get featured on the App Store and suddenly you get 1 million new downloads in a second, but a lot of those players are kind of tourists. They download the app, they open the app for a second, they get distracted and go somewhere else. You shouldn't have to pay for that because it doesn't cost us anything either.
That's pretty rare. That sounds really compassionate. Love for the gaming world, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're all game developers ourselves, so we know the struggles. Building games is probably one of the hardest forms of software development, and we're not trying to make it any harder.
Yeah, no, that's so cool. And I guess I just have a question. Like, you've worked on these different kinds of IPs, different studios. What were the kind of key takeaways from this journey so far? Right? Are there certain ways of working, certain ways of interacting with the player base, or even just interacting with developers? Like, just really keen to tease some of that information out.
Yeah, I think the one theme, just looking at these now, I mean, I don't really have a slide that I have looked at many times with all the games that I've worked on. So I've only sort of thought about this now as you brought it up. But actually, one of the themes that I see here with the games that have been most successful, it's about the community around it. Like I said, with Just Cause 2, it was successful, but then the community modded the game to add multiplayer. That really shut it off. Bionic Commando, it was a game back on SNES, I think, but it was a community that sort of, I think, that requested a remake, and that was sort of the thing that got it going. And we were able to make both the sort of exact remake with Bionic Commando Rearmed, but then also we were able to do sort of a spiritual remake with the full 3D Bionic Commando. So again, it was a community that kind of brought that to life. And then Skullgirls at the bottom there is a bit of an indie darling fighting game. Everything is hand drawn and hand animated, and that was a Indiegogo crowdfunding campaign that we launched to fund it. That was exceptionally successful. Again, the community, the fighting fans really wanted it and fought for it. So there's sort of a theme that the most successful games are the ones where the community is involved. And I would say with Snow, we had a very strong community engagement. And for us, it's ultimately like that's a driving factor that we'll get to in a bit, which is, that relationship with the player base, the developer player relationship is so important for building successful games that, we need to do what we can to strengthen that.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. And I think it's so key, right? There's so much feedback and so much kind of influence the early adopters and the community has on the rest of the game development. I've just seen it with some of our customers at AWS, just going through their public websites. They have a very public roadmap of they're in early release now. They have all these milestones going ahead. So I guess taking a bit of inspiration from the fundraising kind of crowd fundraising programs that there are out there. Yeah. But then also the fact that they just there are so many ways to interact with developers now, whether it's you go see them in person at events, you go use the Discord and actually send them your kind of 2 cents, collecting all that information through the early access. I guess what's kind of your preferred way of doing it? Do you have to do everything, or would you recommend some of our audience to really focus on a specific channel?
I mean, Discord, I think, has become mandatory now because it's the most direct and ubiquitous for everybody has a Discord account now. I mean, Lootlocker as a B2B business, we run our entire business out of Discord. We don't use Slack because we want to be close to the gamers and the game developers that are there already. Yeah. And then then it's a question of where we are in the world. Twitter used to be a very strong way of staying engaged with communities. Nowadays, it's not looking so good. TikTok has become a strong way, but it's a very one-way marketing effort versus actually staying in touch with them. So Patreon has become a stronger example, has become a good example of being able to sort of not just engage them through communication, but also actually get a little bit of money and earn a little bit of revenue during development, which for a lot of indies can make a big difference. So I think,
Yep. Sorry. Okay. And no, I think that's key. Like, I think my last point around this is it's really around the gamers and it's really around the players, right? And that element of community that you mentioned, like having mods for games, breathes in new life. It shows that creativity of the players playing the games and really inspires the actual development team. But also, you mentioned about remasters. So I think we've all noticed this with all the remasters that are coming out onto new platforms, either as ports or just kind of really hitting that nostalgia button. So like some IPs just really deserve a second chance. So
yeah, no, for sure. At the end of the day, if you build a successful IP, you want to be in control of that destiny going forward as a developer. Again, going back to the community, you've built this amazing game, you've launched it, you've got this entire community around it, and then you want to follow it up with a sequel or eventually go back and remaster it. You want to be able to reach out to that community and know who your players are and not have to shout into a dark room where you don't really know who's there to listen.
It's a new wave happening definitely in the gaming space. I will say we were at IKEA today earlier, so I took half day off and then we were at IKEA.
AWS.
Yeah, not me and my family, but then we met another Swedish family. We sat in a sofa and we're chilling out, and I said, "Hey, the Swedish family, we're gonna stay for a week," and then like joked with my kids, and another Swedish family joined in, and we live in London, so it was quite fun. We started engaging, but then they had a son who was 10 years old, and the way for them to connect was like, "Oh, do you play Fortnite? Do you have Xbox a user?" And then they did, and they shared their contacts with each other, and that's kind of new vibe and wave happening, and gaming becomes community based in that regard. So super key to have a strong community around your game.
Yep.
It's interesting, and it's a good way to engaging. We saw that through the pandemic as well, right?
Yep. What struggle we have with that is that, you know, the game has done the selling there. You know, one game has, so, you know, word of mouth has sold the game, but ultimately the player goes to the first party platforms, and it's the first party platforms that is controlling that relationship. And Fortnite has obviously built out quite a lot of technology so that they can have that relationship with the player as well. But for most developers, word of mouth sends the player to Steam or to the Xbox store or PlayStation store, and then it's the PlayStation and Xbox that have that relationship with the player, and not the game developer. And you know, we think that that's really sad.
Yeah, that's a very interesting dynamic that you brought up. But,
and it's a topic we'll touch on later as well, Alexander. Do a little blog post that you wrote, and I think we mentioned that later. But...
Yes. So let's move on. So let's talk about a little bit about Lootlocker. As I mentioned, like, we've got these three major components. You manage your game, you manage your content, you manage your players. And what does that really mean? So when you talking about the game, we're talking about systems like achievements, leaderboards, progression. Progression is a very popular one. Progression can be anything from like a standard XP system all the way up to, you know, a fully fledged battle pass, where you're leveling up, getting rewards. You can either buy the premium battle pass, or you can just have the regular progression system. It can be really a lot of these things. We also provide an entire heroes and class-based system so that the backend can understand if a certain class can equip an item or not, and you can modify that based on a hero as well. So there's a lot that can be controlled from the backend here. When we talk about managing your content, we talk about your cosmetics and your currencies, your DLC, your UGC, loot box and drop tables. There's a lot of different types of content that can be purchased and that can be put in the player's inventory. And a lot of those things have logic that needs to be run on the back end. And so we provide that all out of the box, and very easily manageable through a web interface that I'll show you later. And then finally, managing the players. This is, you know, cross-platform player accounts, different ways of authenticating your players, whether you're authenticating them on the platform they're playing on, like the Xbox, or if you're, you know, playing a mobile game, you often don't get authenticated when you start the game. It's just using your device ID. But then if it's like a Supercell game, they'll try to upsell you to create a Supercell ID. And then that Supercell ID, we provide a system called white label login, which allows you as a game developer to create a game-specific or publisher-specific login ID, that they can create an account with, and then have that as their login for all the platforms. And then it's obviously managing those players through, you know, searching for the player with their play ID, looking through their inventory, their auditing their transactions, seeing their progression, their wallets, all these different things, and being able to perform actions on their accounts. And then looking forward a little bit, we have a lot of exciting things we're working on, and we're working with a lot of games, so we've got a lot of input. But sort of the four main things that I wanted to highlight were universal player authentication. So basically a system for letting players that have played your game on multiple devices to connect their accounts together without having to do anything crazy technical. Basically, you scan a QR code on the device you're playing on, log in with your other device, and you can pick which account will be the primary account. Right. We think it's going to be hugely powerful for a lot of games, especially, you know, we've got games that are launching on PCs, on Steam, early access, maybe spend a year building up the game, launch 1.0, then go to console. And you have a lot of players that have suddenly buy the game on console and they start from square one again.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Friends and clans goes without saying. You know, people really want to have their own friends and clan system and not just rely on the platforms, especially if you're doing cross-platform games. A storefront for actually selling your content, not having to build it in-game. Building a storefront in-game, we did that for Snow. It is a lot of work, and there isn't always an advantage to it. And building it outside, or building it in a browser, would actually let you go around a lot of the app store and platform fees, and would also kind of allow you to see which of your players are buying content outside of the game as well. And then Cloud Code, a bit more of a technical feature, but allows basically AWS Lambda of your own that is connected into Lootlocker, and we manage that for you, so that you can sort of write some custom features or extend a feature if you need to.
That's so cool, Alex. I think this sits together like with digital assets and ownership. Who owns that? You own the assets, sure, for you, but as you're touching on, if you have it on a PC and you want to now play the same game on a console, now then you need to buy it again, obviously, and then that shouldn't perhaps be the case. And also maybe going further down the rabbit hole in terms of digital assets in game and how this all will evolve. Interesting aspects. Who knows where it will go? But that's
the way we see it is that we feel that the platforms, in the games industry we call the first party platforms, the Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo, Steam's, even I guess Epic Games is now becoming one as well. They have not innovated on the technology they provide developers. Steamworks as an SDK and the interface is not so great to work with, and there's not much innovation there because these businesses are also building the hardware that you're playing on often. They're building the operating systems. They're also building their own content library, and so the developers get sort of get sidelined there, and we feel that a lot of the sort of Web3 aspects of digital ownership and cross-platform accessibility has kind of come out of this lack of innovation from the first-party platforms. I believe that if Apple had come and said, here's a protocol that everyone can use, we wouldn't have blockchain NFTs, because people would have just used the Apple system. And if they'd made it cross-platform, that would have been, everyone would have been happy if it had been designed nicely. I personally don't think you need the blockchain to do cross-platform items. You just need a system that works really well, and that's something that sort of we're building towards. And any item in Lootlocker, or we call them assets, any asset in Lootlocker that you have in your inventory is completely unique across the entire backend, across every game on the backend, and that sort of allows us to do some of these more advanced things.
And that's a huge amount of development effort on Lootlocker's part, right? Like, you're actually having to scale the walls of these walled gardens and then build a bridge basically across all of them, right? That's a lot of work, and all of these are evolving at different paces and at different speeds. So how do you even manage that? And actually, I think in the chat we're seeing a lot of interesting comments as well. Even though Lootlocker doesn't have an anti-cheat, I imagine all of these metrics would make it easier for developers to find them, maybe. I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's for sure. I mean, you can definitely see players that are cheating, depending on what they're doing. It's hard to maybe tell exactly how they're cheating, but one of the advantages that we have is that, again, going back to sort of all the assets are linked together on Lootlocker. The player accounts are also linked together. So what could happen in the future, for example, is you see a player is cheating in your game, and we have a reporting system, so another player can report them as a cheater. And let's say there's enough reports that come in, you as a developer can ban that player from your game. You're not banning them just from your game on one device. You can ban them from your game across all devices. And then we also know what other games they've played on other devices. So we could actually theoretically ban that player across every Lootlocker game, across every device, which I think is probably the most powerful anti-cheat possible, because being able to then create a new account and continue being a cheater would be a lot harder then.
Yeah, that makes sense. No, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no problem. But as you
that
said,
would-
like the
that-
whole
that
walled
would
garden
scare
is
a lot
very
of
front of
people.
mind for us.
Yeah.
Which actually is perfectly a segue into our sort of what our mission is. And, yeah, and this is exactly it. We see a world of walled gardens, and we basically want to empower developers to have the direct relationship with their players, and obviously doing this in a way that isn't heavy lift for the developers, because as I said, building games is hard enough as it is. So providing plug and play features that allow for this direct relationship with the players to be cultivated.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And we've got a comment here as well. So thanks so much. I think one of our audience is actually looking at this and looking to develop the game. I guess the question from me then is, how much time does Lootlocker save for devs? Do you have any kind of statistic around if a dev was to self-write, self-create some of these features versus just taking advantage of the Lootlocker SDK and having that plugin feature? Like, what is the comparison that we can make here?
If we're talking about one feature, like let's start with auth. If you wanted to just get, Google or like sign in with Apple for your game, if you're making a mobile game, that will take you a couple weeks probably. It's a pretty complex system they have, and that's one platform. So if you're launching on both mobile platforms, so that's maybe a month of auth work. If you're launching on console and PC, Steam is not so hard. If there's a SDK for it, and it maybe not as advanced as sign with Apple. But then if you start dealing with a console, I mean, it's even more work. And then if you're assuming you're selling the game, suddenly you're now, okay, well, we're doing auth, but we're also having to connect into the stores and all that stuff. And that gets even more complicated. And then if you're talking about the game systems, and being able to write a backend that is also scalable, you're also dealing with servers, scaling internationally, and then not to mention the fact that once your game is live, you don't have to write any more code for your game, but your backend is a living being. It is, as you guys know very well, the backend can go down a year after the game is launched and nothing has changed, just the backend can go down. So it's hard to quantify the actual amount of time you're saving, but I would, it is sort of like, for me, it's an infinite amount of time, because if you do have a successful game, you would have to hire tons of people to keep everything operating. And with Lootlocker, you don't have to worry about any of that.
Well, I think that's why we are working together as well, Alexander, in terms of the cloud journey, what AWS are doing with the platforms and with the services and the features. And just, you shouldn't have to put too much effort down into building the tools and the building blocks. That would be the same, and then instead focus on perhaps gameplay and then the assets internally, and then making sure that you don't have bugs, etc. Which and beta testing, right? And then getting that feedback from the community and building that community, that's where you would make or fail. And you have many smaller indie studios that can create almost AAA level games today, which is quite a cool world to be in. So we can see and feel that it's the same love, it's awesome.
I mean, game developers games are entertainment. They're entertainment built with technology, but they are entertainment, and game studios are entertainment companies. They are not technology companies. They should not be building the technology, which is why 99% of developers are using Unreal, Unity, Godot, and which is why 99% of users should be using a backend as a service that is build all the features for them and not try to build it themselves.
Yep. No, very cool. And perhaps we can go to the next slide then, just seeing what building blocks that you use on AWS.
Yep.
Cool.
We have a team of exceptionally experienced backend developers that have been working with the AWS for nearly several decades. Where I think we're using quite a few systems already, and again, the game is built on Lootlocker, and Lootlocker is built on AWS, and it's the same kind of story. it's you guys have provided us with services that we don't want to have to build and manage ourselves that are exceptionally complex in the same way.
And I think all of these services that you see on screen here, so Lambda, Elasticache, Route 53, SQS, EKS, RDS, like these are all foundational services. Like these are services that are very core to any kind of application or any kind of software that you're trying to run. And I think it's so cool that you've built so much value-added tooling for the game development community, starting with these, kind of humble AWS building blocks. So that's really cool. And I think you have a demo as well for us to show. So
yeah,
that'd be great if we could put that on.
Mainly, just as the last slide, obviously, if you're watching this and interested in learning more, shoot me or Erla or head of BD an email, and we're happy to chat more and learn about your game.
Yeah, shout outs to Erla as well. We've been connecting and amazing human being with just so many different roots in the gaming community and have such a great energy. So she helped us to get together today and have you on the show, which is awesome. So superb to have you here. And
I've just put the QR code for Lootlocker, so just give that a spin, and our audience can have a look at the other features that are available through Lootlocker. But I'll let you put the demo on screen now, Alexander. And in the meantime, if you've just joined our live stream, this is AWS GameTime. This is our 4th episode, so thank you so much for joining us. And today we have Alexander from Lootlocker, and we've seen some of the really cool features and built-in tooling that Lootlocker offers to game developers to speed up your development of your game. So you can focus on just the value-added features, the gameplay, all the things that really make your player's experience more unique, and actually leave some of that undifferentiated heavy lifting, which is a phrase from AWS, but you can let Lootlocker kind of take the responsibility for that part of the development cycle. So it's all been very cool.
Awesome. And we have a cool trailer for the game Snow that you helped to develop, Alexander. So we'll shoot that one, and then we will try to get some live gameplay. I have the game installed. I have practiced it. I'm not an expert yet, but I'm pretty good, I would say. But I've had some connectivity issues. So I've been dropping in and out. So we'll see if I go live. But if not, I did play it before, and I did record some game footage, and I edited that. So we have a little video that we can play. So I'll just drop that in, and afterwards I'll pop out and then we'll do some live gameplay and talk about the game.
Yeah.
He's got to be clean through the rails. He's got the jump tricks. He just has to perform them. He's done them so many times. But can you put it down on action sports' biggest stage? That backside 900 was massive.
Hard into the right side, double core 1260 gets it. Landings improved, amplitude massive.
Dropping in regular stance.
Uh-oh.
With a huge.
He's one for the trip. Oh, yes. And apparently we're going triple now. I guess so. Here's the switch.
Oh, I think we're having a bit of lag on stream. Sorry about that. That trailer, I think we need to try and play it again. Give me 2 seconds. Let's add that back in.
Hard over the shoulder, yes, going for the switch double. 14 gets it.
That was.
If you're looking for amplitude, we've got somebody for you.
Okay. That was really cool. Like that game trailer, really the music had me pumping. And also just the scenery, right? As you do the big jump off of the end. And it really that experience really gets the heart going, to be honest. I'm a skier personally, not a snowboarder. But I can see that's like some really high octane action in that game.
Yeah, no, it was a lot of fun to develop. I both ski and snowboard, and it's been a huge passion of mine my entire life. So getting a chance to try and make a game out of it was a lot of fun. And a lot of a challenge as well. Picking a sports game as your company's first game is not so easy, and then making it free to play and open world was sort of the trifecta of the hardest things you could possibly try to do. But we pulled some stuff off, and it was a well-received game with a couple million players. So we're happy with what we built. And what's sort of most what most important is that we built this. We built the sort of roots of Lootlocker while building this game, and that allowed us as a team of 8 people to do content updates every 6 to 8 weeks. This X Games trailer, we launched the actual a replica of the X Games course. It's a new course every year. They sent us the 3D assets. We
awesome.
Launched that day and date. The day that the X Games went live, we had that launched in the game, and we wouldn't have been able to do that without a backend that allowed us to do content pushes and manage the content separately. Doing timing that across consoles and PC is nearly impossible, because you need to have you have to go through QA and internal QA, but also submission with the first parties. So we were able to do that weeks in advance, get everything clear, and then through the back end control the content itself. And that was really hugely powerful. So what I'd love to do is just give you an idea of what the back end looks like, and how you interact with it. If we
just kind of screen share right now. Awesome.
Yep. I jumped over to Wi-Fi instead. I don't know what's going on. Let's try. Sorry for this, guys. That it's out of my control. If the ISP is making my life miserable, and it's not the perfect idea moment for it. Do you want to try the live gameplay? Otherwise, we can just shoot the video, which was live gameplay, which I played. So it's not fake.
Yeah. No, I think Alexander's going to show us the back end first, and then we can go into the gameplay video that you pre-recorded.
Yeah. Sounds perfect.
Awesome.
Sorry everyone for watching as well.
Approve me for sharing my screen here. There we go. Perfect. So this is the Lootlocker backend. What we've tried to do is sort of make the backend as accessible as possible. Obviously, there's an integration that you need to do with the SDK and the APIs. And that's something for the engineer to do. But unlike most backends, what we then try to do with the user interface and the web console is make it so easy that the least technical person on your team is comfortable in working in this environment. That means that once your engineer has done the integration, the designers can go and start setting up game systems. The producer can go and start playing around with the game and start testing out their own inventories. The artists can start uploading content, and QA or customer support or whoever, community managers can search for players and audit their accounts. So let's have a quick look. I'm going to turn my head to the side because I've got my second screen here, just so you don't think I'm being distracted by something else. So this is the home screen. You can see here we've got Snow. This is the backend, the actual backend for Snow. On the side here, we have our 3 main systems: game content, game systems, and player management. We're also building out a moderation where we have player reporting and also moderating for user-generated content. So we'll jump into the assets and the content here. So here we can see the content in the game. This is, I think we have over 1,000 different assets or items in the game. And what's unique about Lootlocker is that assets are not just sort of a name and some values. We actually go really deep in what you can actually store in each asset's data. And I will demonstrate that. Hopefully I get the right asset. We'll see.
Yeah, that's a lot of headgear designs there.
Yes, a lot of it. And we had, over 24 brands from, real sport brands, the K2 and Armada and DC in the game. They sent us their catalogs. Cool. We made their catalog. We turned their catalogs into 3D assets and then uploaded them to Lootlocker to be pushed to the game. So here's sort of the metadata that's stored about each item. This is a cosmetic item. So what we have here is the variations tab, which is unique to this type of asset. Obviously, we have price and some basic information, but here in the variations tab, we can actually set variations to the same asset. This one, unfortunately, I picked the wrong one. But here we can see this is a purple variation, and if there were to be a blue or a yellow variation, we could have that stored here instead of storing it as a separate asset. Which if you think about e-commerce, where you have 4 different sizes of the same T-shirt, in an e-commerce CMS, they would store these as variations instead of storing them as separate SKUs. And so we do the same thing here, and you can see a lot of this information. This is also connected into Steam, so you can actually see what it looks like in your Steam inventory system.
Oh, wow.
We store platform properties in case you're connecting them to a specific platform. And then we also have filters and storage, where you can provide filters for the game to read. You can also set up key value storage and templates. You can also just upload the files if you want to push these files directly from the backend, and also just dump in blob JSON if you'd like.
So so much fun stuff. I just have to add a comment. It's like, when you do multiplayer environments and then you play with someone else and it becomes a real world. And then that's what I call Space 2.0. It's like everything that's been digital so far. It's a reflection of the reality we're in, right? And now we have games that are just stepping in. So maybe in a multiplayer environment, you meet someone else who's snowboarding, he has an awesome hat, and then you switch hats. And then that data follows. So then you know who you got that hat from. Right, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So we've actually got this question from our audience, Alex, if that's okay. So Hotsted has asked, if I'm reading this right, less than 10,000 players are free. So how can you afford to do that? And are enterprise customers subsidizing the indies in a way?
Yeah, so we will be updating our pricing in the near future. So we won't be as generous in the near future for free. That was a pricing that was sort of there to get us, for growth, so that we could get more users on board, and sort of see how we can help them. 10,000 players on a monthly basis isn't really that crazy. When you're dealing with mobile games and games that go viral that go up to millions of monthly players, or tens or hundreds of millions. So that's we're comfortable in giving some of it away for free. We really only want to make money when the developers has a successful game.
A free sample to give you a little taste. And
exactly.
When they
first one's free.
Yeah, and that's how business works, right? If everyone wins, then the game becomes better with your services, and there becomes more users.
Exactly.
Interesting.
So just to show you another idea of how an asset can work, because I know we're running out of time here. Here is a swag bag. In the game, it's called a swag bag, but it's ultimately a loot box. So you can see the asset data looks very similar, but instead of variations, we now have a thing called loot box contents. And so this is where, again, Lootlocker takes things a step further. The asset is a concept that can be applied to different items, and then you can provide a complexity which makes that asset have some logic attached to it. And so here we have a loot box complexity, and what that means is that you can create these different groups, and each group you can provide a weight, and that weight creates a rarity for that group, so that when the loot box is opened, you have the Lootlocker will decide based on this rarity which group is selected, and then randomly pick based on that group, based on an item based on that group.
And I guess yeah, and that's really interesting, right? So with loot boxes, obviously there's a probability curve applied to all of this. Did you have statisticians coming onto Lootlocker to actually work out the best probability curve for all of these boxes, or do you leave that to the user?
That's up to the developer to figure that out.
Okay, right.
If they feel like this should only be 2%, then that's it. If they want to make it a 1, then you can see it's gone down to 1%.
Super interesting. Very, very cool.
And you can see here as well that I made changes to this. One thing that Lootlocker does special as well is that we have a dual environment system. So right now I'm working in the stage environment, which actually lets me edit these values. If I were to switch to the live environment, you'll see in a sec that it's going to reload, and everything will be locked away from me. So again, talking about accessibility, we provide these two environments so that you can work safely, test the changes, and then you click this button here. It reviews all the changes. It provides you a diff view of all the changes, and you can select change by change which ones you want to push to live. So when you're
Yeah.
dealing with a big content update, you can push all the changes to live at once after they've already been tested.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So your backend will basically adapt to the needs of what your gameplay mechanics, right? And basically trying to allow the developers to focus more on creating interesting, engaging assets for people to kind of either purchase or get involved with. And you don't have to worry about scaling and then managing all of those actual digital bits in the background. That's super cool.
Exactly.
Yeah, very cool.
Quickly going into some of the game systems, I wanted to show you progressions here. And so this is a progression system. We provide what we call multiple progressions. So you can actually set up as many progressions as you want. So they can be per level. If you're like doing like a Angry Birds style or King style, like 3 stars per level kind of thing. Or you can have, an experience point system. And I can just show you very quickly. You can create multiple tiers. Each tier is a level, and then in a tier you can set the threshold, how many points you need to unlock that tier, and then you can set the rewards. You can even set rewards in other progressions, so you can create a lot more complex systems, and you create talent trees as well. And this is you can connect progressions to specific characters and specific heroes, as well as soon you'll be able to connect them to assets. So you could sell the battle pass asset, which unlocks a specific progression. And you can, easily just say, I want to add a new level here. You can set the threshold, and then you've now added another level to it.
That's super cool.
As you can see, it's pretty straightforward to understand, and again, safe to work in because you're all doing this inside a stage environment.
Yeah, very cool.
And then finally, quickly, just to show you the player side of things, player management. Here, we're searching for my personal Steam account, and it comes up with our Steam ID here, so I can see this is my account. I can view the account and see all the content that's stored inside of it. So we've got the platform ID. If this account had been connected to other platforms, you would see those IDs there as well. Right. We can also, if this is loading now, I've got a very big inventory because I've got every asset in the game. But you can see here all the different assets that I've got in my inventory. You can see here the instance ID, as Darshi mentioned. Every asset that's inside your inventory is an instance of that asset, and that is unique across the entire backend. So that ID is unique across every Lootlocker game. If the player had purchased it, you'd be able to also refund that item. You can grant them an item if you'd like from here. This will just load, the full asset list, and you can search for items. You can see their transactions in a sec, where you'll be able to see purchases of assets, purchases of hard currency, and then where they've spent soft currency as well. And you can view the details of these purchases. So you can see here there was a purchase of the large credit pack, so purchase of currency. You can store files, key values. You can actually see here the progressions. We could actually start a progression, and we could actually update that progression from the back end manually if we wanted to. You can quite a lot you can do here.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And we have one final question from one of our audience again, Upside Yonder. So if I were developing a game using Lootlocker, should I send requests to update the in-game inventory actions as they occur? Or would it be better to send batched data requests? They're new to this and they're not quite sure how the process works.
It probably depends on what the outcome, but I think doing a single request is probably okay. I'm not the best person to ask for that, so I'd suggest jumping into our Discord, which you can find on our website. I think it's discord.gg/lootlocker, and our developers are happy to help you there. We also provide lots of samples. If you look on our YouTube, we have videos entirely about managing inventories and sample code as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for answering that. And great. I think maybe we have kind of 5 minutes to go. So I'm wondering if we have enough time to actually see some of the gameplay that was recorded by Darshi prior to this episode. Maybe we can put that on the screen.
I was just booting up Snow, and we could try to get into it quickly and play it live otherwise, but it seems that my PC is running very warm. So yeah, let's just do the video, and we can talk to that and that's coming up now, because we don't have really audio to stream with the game, so this will be more of an engaging atmosphere as well. So we do that for a few minutes and then wrapping it up.
Yep, great.
So yeah, I'm starting with a rodeo, I think, or backflip take grab. Yeah, I'm not remembering my names of the tricks.
So Darshi, just to be clear for our audience, Darshi only started playing this about this time yesterday.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of skill and effort that's gone into this video already.
Yeah, this is the tutorial level as well. So Darshi's not really testing himself. There's one sort of main mountain, where we've actually built an entire 360 degrees of mountain face that you can explore with castles and hydroelectric dam and town and tons of stuff.
Yeah, no, it's super cool.
I mean, really good game. And I'm a snowboarder, and I read, I watched a YouTube tutorial, and then there was a comment there that said one dude was snowboarding and he smashed his knees, and now he can't push himself as hard as he used to. And I really can veto that, because I can repeat that, because I had a pretty horrible motorcycle crash a few years ago. So when I go snowboarding now, no way that I can do what I used to do. And I used to do like 540s and big jump, 25-meter big jump gaps and crashing in those. And if I do that now, it'd be a different story. But it really, his comment was like, it really enabled me to feel that spirit that I had when I was snowboarding. And I took that on board. So I could see when I go in to push in front of the jump, really how I push down the body, and like you have to kind of hold down A, and then you can't really steer when you go in for the jump, and then you have to prepare yourself. So if you press the left stick, so then you push that up, and then you create a higher momentum, which is exactly the same when you snowboard in real life and skiing. So like you prepare yourself in order to take that kicker in a correct angle. And this is why I love gaming, because it's not to not having the experience in real life, but to relive it as we do when we when we're out and about. So yeah, super stoked, and it was fun.
Oh, watch out for the tree! Oh god!
Yeah. What tree? Bam! So yeah, it's a cool game. I didn't get enough time, but now when you showed Lootlocker, Alexander, and then we can kind of get an idea and understanding on where the different items sits in, and how you can have those, as loot, have your assets, right? So really cool game, and really cool to see how it sit together to get that understanding of like, okay, how actually would it work? So yeah, fabulous stuff. Fabulous stuff.
If you are playing next time, you're playing Darshi, all the crowds we didn't have enough performance left to like have real characters in the crowd. So there are all these inflatable versions with my face on it. That was not a selection by me. That was the team that thought that would be really funny.
It's a shame time goes so fast. Otherwise, I had the snow up and running. We could have gamed it a bit. But this has been an amazing time with you, Alexander. Thank you so much for jumping on. We told Alexander, we got this sorted 2 days ago, that we were going to have Alexander on the stream, and we worked quickly and we made it happen, right? And that just goes to the testament to the gaming world as well. If there's an interest and an inspiration, then we're all rocking it. We are absolutely on time. So we normally play a little bit of a cool marketing video. We'll skip that today, and instead, thank you, everybody. Yeah. And great to have you, Alexander and Darren.
Thank you, Darshi. Thank you, Darren.
Yeah, cool. Perfect. So keep gaming and keep building on AWS. Thanks so much.
All right. Peace out.